in the moment when we've got a lot of insecure thoughts going on in our minds, it really looks and feels like we don't have health.
Yeah.
I think our experience is so real in that moment, and our feelings are, in a way, very stressful and overwhelming that we're not seeing clearly at that moment in time.
Mm.
And so to think about health with someone at that point, it's almost, I can understand that and probably realize that it's quite hard to grasp that in a way. I wonder anyway.
Yeah. And I know that, you know, when we've spoken sometimes, it's often been suggested that when somebody speaks of their difficulty, when somebody speaks of their ill health, and we might also say you have health as well, where we've been, it's been considered that perhaps we've not validated somebody's experience of suffering. And I think it's really important to see that we see both, you know, and I think that's quite a new idea actually within treatment, within health professionals, that we can show up in our human form as suffering, really struggling, and that's the ill health that we see. And still, with that ill health, we also have a deep down health within us at all times.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes for me, it's a little bit like stepping into a room that's dark. And if you don't know that there's a light there, you think it's only darkness. But if somebody lets you know that actually there's a switch on the wall, you can switch that on and it'll illuminate the light, the room, you can have two experiences and the room can be both. And I think it's a bit like that with our health. If we don't know there's the ability to see our health, even when we're experiencing ill health, we're missing a really important part of us.
Yes, yes. I really like that sort of analogy about noticing that there's another half of the puzzle.
Yeah.
I think it's totally natural, isn't it, as human beings, that we're very focused on what we're noticing, and I guess in the moment we might not see that there's a light switch at the back of the room.
Yeah.
Because we just don't think to turn around and look. And
Yeah.
probably we don't see it either. You like you say, like it's dark, so we can't. It doesn't stand out straight away. But yeah, it's almost like if we can come to think about the darkness being like simply an absence of light, and we can do something with light.
Yeah.
Amazingly, that's some real sort of hope and something to aim for of what's possible, I think.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they're struggling with some sticky thinking. And she was saying to me, I just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can't see that I can get better. And that sense of hopelessness is really hard. But I see that even when we can't see the light, it's still there. You just need to wait until it reappears again, and it always will. And I think for me, part of our job is not necessarily to be in the darkness and only experience the darkness. Absolutely hear someone's experience of what it's like to stand in the darkness, but also remind them that there's another opportunity to switch the light on. And even if they can't see that light right now, it's still there to be switched on.
Yes,
it doesn't go anywhere.
I like that. Yes, and I think this is where kind of the way out for me is really getting to grips with the nature of thought in creating our experience, whatever that experience is. And you know, what's visible is when we're struggling emotionally or with our feelings is all of the behaviors that we're doing. And probably, you know, if anybody's gone through a process of trying to fathom all of this out, we get immersed in techniques and ways of cope and distract ourselves, and we kind of stay on this level, if you like, the level of involved in our psychology, if that makes sense. Our psychology being the content of our thinking, all of the worries and insecure thoughts that we're having, the experience of our feelings and physical sensations within that, panic and dread and heartbeats faster, and it takes up all of our focus and energy, and like that's okay at that level. But what if we went into a level which is deeper than that, which is beyond all of that, kind of seeing what is before our thoughts?
If we haven't known to look there, we're not going to look, are we? We might happen upon it, but actually if we have an idea that it's there, even if we can't see it at all times, we start to look, as you say, before thinking, before our psychology. And I guess it's no accident that, you know, you work under the name of Before Thought, because that's where the magic is, isn't it? That's where the solution, if there is such a thing as a problem, that's where it lies. You know, it's not in our thinking, it's not changing our psychology, it's not making that different and doing stuff, it's actually getting curious about before the thought.
And one of the really great things like about this direction is that rather than like my experiences in the past of trying to cope and manage symptoms, it was one of exhaustion, to be honest. And I think eventually I just resorted to avoiding life in ways. So if it was that job or that situation that was just getting too much, it didn't matter how much I did some relaxation after work or how much I immersed myself in a crossword. My anxiety just kept getting worse and worse every time I went back to that situation. And I think it almost it's tiring and exhausting trying to just deal with it in that way all the time. And I think sometimes it's hard to describe what the term within means. But because sometimes when we talk about health as being within us, I'm inclined to start like trying to look. And the wise people and mystics throughout time have talked in a very simple way. But I remember when I was first coming across this sort of language, it just made no sense to me when I was trying to listen from my head. And I was going, what on earth are they talking about? It makes no sense whatsoever. And it's probably very confusing and contradictory.
You probably get lots of people having a peek inside, Anthony.
And I think that's why it's a tricky thing to talk about and describe, because we can only really talk in metaphors about something that has no form, really. And I think science has been great recent years, you know, the development of really getting to grips with what particles are and what's the very smallest unit of matter. Because basically the answer is nothing. You know, like you can fit on a pinhead the amount of particles it should be in the desk or that chair. But it really doesn't look like that. You know, it looks solid to me. So how can it be full of nothing? So it's a total paradox to our minds.
And I think, you know, science there has been a shift, I think, because we always seek to understand as human beings. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways that served us. It served humanity. It served our progress to understand, to be able to make changes, to be able to treat and cure some things. But actually, in seeking only to understand, we've lost sight of the importance of not needing to understand and be able to define everything, because a lot of what we're talking about is beyond form, beyond definition, beyond understanding. And it's about learning to be okay with not making something into something that as a human we can understand, because it doesn't need to be. And I think at some level I see health a little bit like that. Yes, we have a lot of understanding of, you know, what makes bodies work and what makes bodies not work so well, and what makes our minds, well, do we have a lot of understanding about our minds? I'm not so sure. We have a lot of understanding about brains, perhaps more than we did. But I think the idea of health doesn't need to be understood in the same way necessarily in order to experience it and feel it. I think sometimes trying to define it, trying to understand it, takes away from what it is, because it's a sense of peace, of being in that moment. It's a sense of kind of, yeah, well-being that is beyond necessarily every bit of understanding that a human can have. We seek a lot in medicine, thankfully, to understand, but we forget sometimes it's okay not to understand everything.
And I think that's the key, Sarah, is it's just trying to find nice feelings. You know, and when we don't interfere with our minds, so when we don't overthink and dwell too much on the negative side of life, you'll find yourself just residing in your own being, which is health. Like default state to begin, but I think we don't get taught that growing up, and we live in a world, possibly depending on your culture and your experiences in life, where the message is that you got to keep looking outside for the answer, and that when something is wrong, you've got to really think about it, problem solve it, and find some way out of it, which works really well for stuff on the outside. Yeah, you've got a car and you need to get it looked at and know what the problem is and then fix it. But I think your own sort of wisdom will guide you. You know, when you're trying to do this with your own emotions and thoughts and feelings, and you're getting more into trouble, it's just common sense, isn't it, that if you're still feeling more and more exhausted, maybe that's not the right strategy.
Absolutely. And you know, Anthony, I absolutely agree with that. I think that doing, and we're good at doing as human beings, and we grow up being praised for doing and for achieving, and that's all that outside stuff. But what about being? What about just being with whatever is? Not necessarily having to fix it or change it, or because I think the nature of us when we are in that state of being is we're in free flow. And so any tricky feelings that come, if we're in that state of being rather than doing, they'll come and they'll go, and we'll get some good feelings, and then we might get some more tricky, but all of that's okay when it's coming and going, because none of it's hanging around forever. The nature of us is that we don't stay in one feeling forever, so we actually don't need to do anything to make it change. It'll do it on its own, but we interfere.
And hopefully, I think, Sarah, you know, as we keep on having some weekly conversations, I guess everybody listening, I guess it would be nice for us, I guess, to explore the nature then of our minds, of this intelligence of life that's within us, because we are life, you are life, I'm life, he is life. The fact that we're conscious, you know, like we've got consciousness, or another word for that is awareness of our experience, and thought, because that's the key to it all, right?
Yeah.
Not thinking, but thought singular.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
fact that we think.
And I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about how you see the difference between thought and thinking. What is that for you, Anthony?
I think thinking is this state when we are using our mind in a way that perhaps doesn't give us all the answers that we want, but we have a free will to think that it will. So life can be whatever you think it is. And for every human being in the world, there are as many realities, individual realities, that people are seeing life through their thinking. And I remember Sydney Banks describing, imagine what it'd be like to try to work your way through everybody's daily thinking every moment out of 6 billion people, and the mess that would be.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what we're doing in our own internal heads. You know, like I'm saying head being where we think, but I don't know where it is.
Who knows where they come from?
It's like there's no end of complexity and confusion. You try to sort of, you know, that term like trying to knit fog.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get more and more determined to get it, but it's like an impossible task. And then I think the beauty of looking more into the nature of thought being singular, like one thought, life is one thought. And it's through the power of thought that everything else becomes into motion, you know, that when we look out the window and we've got this like electricity flowing through us that allows us to witness and experience whatever we want. There is a reality, but we get to see that reality in whichever way we want.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned Sid Banks, and something that he describes brilliantly, and I can't quote it exactly, but you know, he says, somebody says to me, so are you saying that chair isn't real? I'm thinking about it, but it's not real. And he says, no, the chair is real, but it comes to you as an experience through thought. And so it's our thinking, it's our inner world that creates our experience of the outer world always. So yes, there's a chair there, but it's never what we think it is. We experience it through thought. But you know, we all see things slightly differently. We see things differently day to day within ourselves, because the nature of our thinking is it changes and it comes and it goes, whereas thought is very much kind of one thing that we all experience. And it's not, it doesn't have to be delved into in all the minutiae of every single thought that we have. It's just thought.
Yes. And I think there's some real benefit in just taking ourselves out of the worldly stuff for a while, you know, negativity. And because, you know, in modern life particularly, we're 24/7, we're just in our heads thinking and thinking. I know like years ago, we used to have Sunday where everything's shut. And you just have some quieter time. But I think with the advent of computing and social media, it's almost like we're just switched on thinking and thinking about things more and more. And I think there's some incredible, that's the beauty of kind of talking about the nature of thought and of consciousness and of mind being this intelligence behind life. These like universal principles lead us into a quiet mind, just like not listening to try to understand them, but just to feel a nice feeling that comes from it.
I think that's, as you say that, I'm reminded of some of the people that have really tried to understand this with their thinking, understand the concept of the three principles via their intellect, and that's not going to help, because it's not the understanding as a concept that we're looking at. It's experiencing it through a feeling, through a being. And I think as humans, we're not so good at doing that anymore, because we're used to doing lots of the time, and we're used to understanding and then intellectualizing. And I guess that, you know, I've come across a lot of people that get really frustrated. Well, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't change my experience. And it won't, because we need to feel it. We need to just be with it and then see. And I'm one of those people at the beginning, Anthony. You know, I try to really understand it in terms of, and I'd be, well, is it a bit like mindfulness, or is it a bit like this? And I understand what you're saying, but how's that going to change my life? And it's before that we need to go to. It's before that understanding and that kind of working it out and just being with it.
Yeah. And I think that's why we say at the start, isn't it, that all these words and us talking is just metaphors for something that is indescribable. But like you say, within you, there's this forgotten feeling that just resides all the time. And when you have a silence or a stillness, just even if it's just for like a moment, and you fall away from all of the thinking that's been occupying your focus. And it's like that just natural state of meditation, not meditation where you've got to do something or concentrate to be in meditative state. Just like little children, you know, like you just fall into it. Daydreaming out the window, or you just totally not interested in what's been going on around you. And you just, in that place, suddenly you have this insight, and it's like sight from within. You can't explain it, something clicks, and everything you thought was really complicated or not getting it, just, oh, it looks really simple now. I get it.
Yeah, I love that way of describing insight. It is sight from within, as you say, and I think it's making some space, you know, and that doesn't mean creating time to do it. It just means just allowing life to happen, not making life happen, not making yourself achieve or be busy, just getting curious about what just being means.